Welcome to Testimonies with Tony, where real people share real encounters with God. I'm your host, Tony, and I truly believe that every encounter with God is miraculous, awe-inspiring, and deeply moving. Today, I'm especially excited because I got to sit down with Pastor Rick from my home church, Lifepoint Christian, to hear his powerful story of God's love and mercy. It's not a stretch to say that God snatched him from the clutches of the devil and brought him from a suicidal teen to a powerful pastor and preacher and shepherd to hundreds in his congregation. I personally have been the beneficiary of his wisdom, teaching, guidance, and love for the past 7 years, all of which wouldn't have happened but for God showing up in his lowest moment decades ago. Let's dive in. All right, so welcome to episode 1 of Testimonies. Thanks for being my first guest, first of all.
It's exciting. I'm loving it.
Yeah. Yep. So why don't we start? Introduce yourself and tell us who you are and what you do.
So my name is Rick Bosnack. I live in Waterford. My wife and I have been pastoring Lifepoint Church for in June it'll be 25 years. We've raised our 4 daughters there. And ministry has been my life, really, since I was as an adult. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, you're my pastor, and I will say that I appreciate you guys very much. I think part of the reason we talked before we started recording that, part of the reason for the growth that Courtney and I have been able to experience in Christ is due to you guys' leadership, and it's. I look and I don't think we would be where we are without you guys. In fact, I know we wouldn't be where we are without you guys. So thank you for that.
It's very gracious. Thanks.
Yeah. So how old were you when you became a Christian?
I was, it's interesting how you determine, when God made himself known or when that experience took place. I knew of Christ as a little boy in a unique way, but I think probably my true born-again experience happened when I was about 18 years old.
Okay. That's what I thought I remembered, but I thought it was like your late teens. Can you tell me a little bit about your childhood, like prior to, how'd you grow up? I mean, if you didn't, you knew about Christ as a boy, but you didn't go to church, I assume. Well, I know you've told stories about, tell us about that.
Well, my very first memory, I think was, interestingly, getting locked in a stairwell by stepbrothers. And I remember being just terrified that I would never get out, My second memory was waving goodbye to one of those younger stepbrothers and a stepsister, because my older blood sister was rushing us out of the house as my mom had given her direction to get us all out because she was leaving her second husband. So,
how old were you at that time?
I was 4 years old at that time. My mother was giving birth to me while my dad was in the same hospital suffering leukemia, of which he died several months later, but left my mom, who was 34 at the time, with 6 of us.
Wow.
And the second husband that I just spoke of had 7 kids, and there was 13 kids in a 3-bedroom little bungalow, and that was the house we left that night. That was I think the second memory of my life. And then Mom married another man with 9 kids. So
holy moly!
Yeah, 22 kids.
Yeah.
Not all lived together at the same time, of course, but yeah, that was kind of the beginnings of my life, and all without church or Christianity at that point.
Right. So you said when you were 4 years old when you guys left the second. So your biological dad had passed away, and then the second.
That's correct.
Your first stepdad at 4 years old.
Right. Mom met him in a bar. It was interesting. That bar was a big part of my life as a little boy, and it's still operating. And locally. But that was kind of my mom's life. That's where she kind of congregated with friends, and that's how she met her men, interestingly. So
Right.
the second husband and the third husband she met them both in the same bar.
Really?
Yeah.
Her third husband, he was like your dad now, right? Or no?
He became probably the most stable person in my life from the time I was 4 or 5 years old until the time I left home to go to college. And he worked at General Motors and worked afternoons. So when I would see him pull in the driveway and the lights would, kind of wash the interior wall of the living room, you could set your clock by it. He was home every night. And this was new for our family because very unstable.
Yeah.
And difficult beginnings for me and for my sister and all of the kids, really. It was, when Dad died, the family fell apart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you had the third, what was his name? Your stepdad,
Don. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I don't say the second and the third. So Don, he was the one with 9 kids?
He was the one with 9 kids. Jack was the one with 7 kids.
Okay.
Yep. And Matt was my dad.
Your dad.
My
I'm interested to, because I didn't grow. I know a lot of testimonies come out of that, the adversity as a kid, and I didn't have that. So I'm wondering, I think I'm interested, the more people I talk to about this kind of stuff, that just to hear the differences and how quickly God moves in certain people's lives versus others, with how they grew up, and whether it's like, a cushy kind of obviously we had our problems too, but nothing like, I'm sure my upbringing was a little more vanilla than yours, I would guess. So
I don't want to paint we weren't drug dealers and murderers. It was just more of there was a lot of instability and dysfunction.
Okay. Were all the kids? Were all the kids in the house together?
Well, Jack, the second stepdad, or first stepdad, I guess.
Yeah.
He had custody of his 7 children, and he was a drinker. He was drunk a lot. He'd come home from the shop and just drink. So the kids kind of they did their thing. Yeah. They did their own thing. Introduced my brother and my sisters to probably lots of things that they'd never seen before.
Right.
I was pretty young, so. But yeah, a lot of misfortune at that point. And my mom was, she was middle 30s and trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
God bless her,
Yeah. That's interesting too, to think about your parents when they're, once you get to that age. We're in that time where I found some home videos of my parents when they were my age, and it's like, wow, my parents were actually just, young adults.
They were young ones.
Well, I don't know if young adults is my category anymore, but yeah, they were young ones, and they were, you look at them your whole childhood like they've got it all figured out, and why are you making these decisions? Like, you should know better. And, you realize they're just figuring it all out themselves.
I got a friend that wrote a song. I love, one of the lines says, "You're barely young, and then you're old."
Yeah.
It seems like that.
It does. Well, I'm only 37. Yeah, I'll be 38 in January, and or no, I'll be 30. I don't know. I forget.
Yeah, man, you're
obviously
you're nearing the end.
My memory's going. I'll be 37, but I already get. I'm sure it'll just grow exponentially, but I already have the things where it's like, man, one thing just starts. Oh yeah, my shoulder's starting to feel better now. Oh, but now my other shoulder. It's like,
oh man, just hold on.
Yeah, I know. I can't wait.
Just hold on.
So yeah, you already. Did you have any extended family? Was there any? I guess was there any? Were there any Christians in your life that were family, like aunts, uncles?
None that I recall. My mother had 4 sisters and 2 brothers. My grandmother, interestingly, I've learned through the years, she really was kind of a bit of a maiden of a home. She had lots of men in her home, and it's kind of weird to think of your grandmother like that.
Yeah. Your mom's mom?
My mom's mom. And yeah, it was a tough upbringing for Mom too. So no faith in the home at all. Mm-hmm. Nor do I ever remember hearing about anyone, trusting the Lord or coming to the Lord throughout, my childhood. And I had an uncle, evidently, I didn't know him, who committed suicide. Another one who I guess my mother hardly ever saw. So it's kind of strange. My dad, the same way, never knew he had brothers, never knew them. Mm-hmm. So family was really disconnected and no faith at all that I know of.
Yeah. That's interesting. And when you think, it makes me think of like generational curses and stuff that from a family, that doesn't know God, how that the branches of just the enemy and dysfunction just seep down, and for your siblings, did any of them end up coming to Jesus?
Later, after I became a Christian, some of my family responded to the Lord. I was fortunate that a woman 3 or 4 houses up from us when I was a little boy, mm-hmm. This woman had come down to visit with my mom, or actually just to introduce herself, I guess, and asked if she could take my sister and I to church. Mm-hmm. And I think my mom was probably like, hey, a couple hours away from the kids would be great. Yeah. So this woman, who never drove herself, would have her husband bring him. I remember it, his big Plymouth Fury, probably sat 35 kids. Right. And we would ride to church just up the road. And he would sit out in the parking lot and drink Pabst Blue Ribbon and wait for us to come out. And I learned in that little church about the love of Jesus, and I remember it. Yeah. Of course, as I became a teenager, I got away from that. But those were the seeds, I think, that started that work in me. Yeah. And I always had fond memories and a sense of God's presence and His love.
Yeah. So I want to ask about when, your born again testimony experience. But before that happened, what did you like? So I guess my question is, what were your thoughts of Christianity and church before, like maybe the years leading up to you being born again?
Well, again, always fond memories. I'm in the ministry, so I hear stories of parents who say, you know what, I'm not going to influence my kids concerning the Lord. I'm going to let them grow up and make decisions for themselves. And my question is always, well, what reference are they going to have? Yeah. I was fortunate. I feel like much of my developed faith over the years is a result of those things I learned foundationally as a little boy. And that's where I turned. My teenage years were reckless, and I was just a stupid kid and did a lot of dumb stuff. But when I finally came back to the Lord, or He chased me down, yeah. I think much of my initial understanding was kind of born in that time when I was a little boy, and just learning about the Bible stories. I remember I just had a real sense that Jesus loved me. Never really doubted that. So that was an important foundation. I would say that to every parent, that even if you're not, serving God yourself, get your kids in a place where they can learn, at least learn, so that they can have some kind of a reference of who God is, a good church that would teach them the truth. I think that's just so critical.
Yeah, and that makes me think too, that I've heard that too. Well, actually, I could say that I used to be like that, where I just I don't want to indoctrinate my kids, and that type of mentality. And then over the years now, I've started to realize that everything is, it's like there's no such thing as like an unobjective fact. Like we have to weight things, and if we don't tell them what we believe is true, someone else is going to tell them what they believe is true. And when it comes down to it, it's all faith, at the fundamental level, it's all a faith journey, whether you're talking
exactly
about science or religion.
Yeah, let's let the wolves raise our children.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
So you teach our kids to be kind. You teach them to respect others.
Yeah.
That's the same type of thing. Yeah. It's important.
So when that happened and you turned and then God chased you down, can you describe? It seems like for everybody that I've talked to, that, and me personally, that moment is something you never forget, and it's like the most powerful moment in your life. Was it a moment, or was it gradual, or?
I grew up in a neighborhood that had 3 streets, and honestly, that neighborhood was my life. To give you an idea, I don't know a friend that I grew up with who graduated from high school. All 5 of my siblings quit high school. My mom and dad quit high school. Our whole life was very narrow, really happening on those streets. I played with those boys and girls growing up, and as they grew up, they began to experiment with lots of different things, and I was a part of that. So it was drugs and everything that comes with that whole lifestyle. And it as we grew, it started as fun, as it usually does, and then it became addicting for a lot of my friends. So I was really caught up in that, and the difficulty came when my brother, who 10 years older than me, he had met a woman and fell in love with her, and my brother was a smart, handsome dude, man. But he loved the booze. He loved it. And when they finally broke up, he never really was able to pull it back together. Broke both of his femurs in a car or a kind of an accident at the same time. 2 trucks had their tailgates down, and one was stuck, and he was trying to pull it out and got between them and snapped his legs in half. And then he got on the pills. Yeah. And so in the midst of drinking and partying and that whole thing with my friends, my brother moved back into our home with that very strong addiction. And it was difficult. And I remember being 16 years old. It's interesting. I'd had an encounter. I was over at my sister's home cleaning out her garage for a couple of bucks or something. And I don't know how to explain this, Tony. I don't. But I found myself laying on my back in the yard. I don't remember laying down. I don't remember how I got there. But I remember laying down, it's like I couldn't move. And I heard inside of my soul the words, "It is time." And I was far from God. I hadn't been to church in years at that point. I had no interest in serving God. I was just doing my own thing. And I knew what that meant. Somehow I knew what that meant. But I got up from that experience and didn't change a thing. Yeah. And
so you connected it in that moment with God, like you knew that's God talking to you?
I somehow knew intuitively that was the Lord, but I didn't do anything about it. Yeah. That Christmas, my brother, on Christmas Eve, my brother he used to drive with his legs swung over that little hump in the old pickup trucks. Back in the day, I'm sorry, I'm showing my age now. But it was anybody that's, old enough to where they remember when the Earth's crust wasn't hardened yet. Right. They'll remember the hump in the truck. And he had to swing, because his legs were in braces, he had to swing his legs over that hump.
Like you talking about on the floor?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. They still, I think maybe the drive.
Well, where the console is, that kind of thing. So anyway, he drove with his left foot. Okay. Pulled in the driveway and floored it. We remember hearing the truck, floored it, drove his truck through the front of our house, nearly killed my dad and my mom. The wall came up as he drove in, and I was thrown across the room. He was higher than a kite, had a gun in the truck, just staring straight ahead like he was out of his mind. Yeah. And from that experience, it kind of set me on a path of thinking that my brother was trying to kill us intentionally.
Yeah.
And then determining how, over the period of 18 months or so, how I could kill my brother without getting caught, because he's trying to kill us.
Right.
Trying to kill mom and dad, trying to kill me somehow. So I'm going to kill him, bury him in the garden or something,
Right.
and not get caught. And through that, I began to take more and more pills. I was anxious. I was a wreck. And, I'm a 17-year-old kid at that point, 16, 17, trying to keep some form of sanity, thinking how I'm going to kill my brother. Felt like I was responsible to keep my parents safe. Everybody around me at that point is getting high, and no reference for life or sanity or freedom or health. And through that, I snapped. I literally snapped. And that was the moment that you're talking about that ultimately pushed me toward seeking God again.
Just out of curiosity, because to put everything in context, how old? So, are you the youngest? How many? When you were 16, you were the youngest. Okay.
Of all 22 stepbrothers and everything.
Yeah,
I'm the very youngest.
Okay, all right, that makes sense. All right. Yeah. So you were. So he was coming back, and you were the youngest. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So you said that. What do you mean by snapped? I guess.
I told you I had to quit school. I was in a band. It was kind of like a country song, played backwards or something.
Yeah.
My band broke up.
Right.
I broke up with my girlfriend. I had quit school, so I was working at this factory, and I remember that place. And God bless people that work in factories, but I was just a bum. I felt like a complete loser. I was depressed. But I'm working in this factory on the second floor, and I'm feeding these printed circuit boards into an oven, a slow conveyor belt oven, so they could dry.
Mm-hmm.
And the only way I can explain it is if I took a large, fat syringe and could stick it in you and suck the hope out of your soul.
Yeah.
That happened to me.
Yeah.
It was as though darkness came to me and caved in on me so powerfully and so heavy that I literally and almost immediately wanted to die. I wanted to take my life. I was absolutely without hope. And I remember the day. I remember driving home, and this voice began to dominate my thoughts. It was like an internal voice that would would almost, force me. It was forcing me to kill myself. I would be driving, and I would hear this, kill yourself, just like a chant. Mm-hmm. And I would feel like I need to drive my car into a tree or something to take my life. And I had run home. I was still living at home, and I told my mom, I'm going crazy. I'm losing my mind. Well, she was clueless. She didn't have any idea what to do with me. She scared her to death because I'm telling her I want to die.
Right.
And that set me on a course I was so desperate. I went to psychiatrists and psychologists at that point, and even I remember a preacher that somebody told me to go see, and he told me some stuff I don't remember, and it was nobody could reach me. The proverbial fetal position, I remember that. Yeah. I remember literally being curled up in a ball, and everything around me, what you would, this moment right here where we're talking and we can live in the moment and enjoy it. It was none of that for me. I was in a prison of my own mind. Yeah. And it was awful. It was awful.
Yeah. What ended up bringing you out of it?
Well, I remember a doctor had told my mother and I that, the best thing to do is, just try to, I understand why they practice medicine.
Right. Yeah.
I remember they had me on some medication, and they said, listen, just try to stay busy. Okay. So
That's probably similar to when you have that realization that your parents were young and just figuring it out. I bet doctors get that when they are in medical school, they're probably like, "Oh, so my doctor really doesn't know everything."
Yeah. Well, they were trying, and I took pills to lift me up and calm me down and all kind of stuff. But I remember the counsel was just try to divert yourself, try to stay busy, keep your mind off things. So for whatever reason, my mom convinced me I should go bowling. And I went bowling, interesting, at the 300 Bowl in Waterford, Michigan, where everybody knows where that is. Bowled there when I was a kid. And I took my 15 and 14-year-old nephews, and I was 18. And Tony, I was looking down at the lane. I remember it. It was 41 years ago now. Mm-hmm. I was looking down at the lane. I had a bowling ball. My nephews are behind me. And I'm hearing, kill yourself, kill yourself, kill yourself. More forceful than I'd ever heard it. I began to cry out of sheer panic. I felt like I was absolutely in prison at this bowling alley. I couldn't move. I couldn't think. I felt like I couldn't turn around because I was embarrassed that I was crying. Yeah. And it was at that moment, that very moment, when I heard, out of all of that confusion, I heard what I knew, somehow I knew was the voice of God. And he said, take my hand. And I don't remember if I literally reached my hand up or if just within me I took his hand. But the moment I did it, it was as though somebody poured like warm oil over me, like from the top of my head, and it flushed every bit of that fear out of me. And that voice stopped immediately. And I was like, and I could breathe, and I knew like something just happened to me. I couldn't put it into words. I don't remember finishing the game, the bowl. I don't remember conversation with my nephews. All I remember is driving home, and running in the house and telling my mom, "You've got to get me to church." I didn't know what church. Yeah. She didn't know what church. She's like, "Well, I don't even know what church." We figured out a church. It's the church I pastor now and the church you attend. Yeah, that's great. And ended up at that church. It was a Sunday evening service. We went in there. I have no idea what that preacher said. All I knew is I needed to get to the front of that church. Somehow I knew that. I ran down to the front of that church and I sobbed for, it had to be an hour. Just felt sorry now as I look back on it, how long that piano player had to keep playing. This stupid kid down here slinging snot, at the altar. There was a woman praying for me, and I didn't know who she was the whole time. When I got up, I hugged her, found out that she married my mom's second husband after my mom, and that her and my mom had gotten in a bar fight. She broke a beer bottle over my mom's head in that bar, and they're hugging. And, God I was so transformed in an instant. And the very moment I got up from that altar where I'd been sobbing, I knew what I would do for the rest of my life. I was so confused and lost without any direction in my life. And when I stood up, I knew what I was going to do. I knew who I was. I knew that I was saved, like literally saved. Yeah. Like God, He saved my life. I knew I was cleansed. I was a different person. I still can't explain it. Yeah. I don't know how He does that.
It's amazing. That's what I mean. Like when we were talking before we started recording that, I've seen some other things online of the really crazy testimonies where, it's a 180 from murderer to evangelist or something like that. But it's you were just a depressed kid that was suicidal. But now actually that makes me wonder, now knowing what you know, spiritually. Do you think that that was with what was going on with your brother and with you? I mean, that war in your mind of he's trying to murder us and I got to murder him first. Like, what do you think that was a spiritual demonic attack of some sort, or do you think it was just kind of a mental thing?
I don't, when I look back at it now and I think about my brother, I don't think that was anything that was in his heart.
Right.
I think he was clearly high and he was messed up. But my brother had a good heart. There was, and drugs and alcohol jacked him up bad.
Yeah.
How the devil was working in all of that, I don't know. I know, a lot of people ask me that, particularly with mental illness or addiction. Does the devil cause that? I don't know. All I know is that the devil uses it.
Right.
Whether he's the cause, I don't know. But my brother died after leaving a bar late at night, and we had the opportunity to share Christ with him. And great, another whole story. But my heart is free from that bitterness and hatred I had toward my brother. I forgave him. God helped me with that.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know how to answer all of those questions about how, what comes first, the cart or the horse.
Yeah.
God only knows.
I'm just, and it's just interesting that I've always been more of the, Courtney's the more spiritual, in tune more, I think, with the spiritual realm than I am, but I'm learning. And it's interesting, before where I would have dismissed it, where everything's psychology and, brain function. Now I'm starting to open up to the fact that, well, these thoughts come from somewhere, good and bad. We say, I've heard this before, that, we say, I thought this thing. Well, what do you mean you thought that? What does that mean, that you thought that? So whether it's a good thought or a bad thought that's going through your head, it's coming from somewhere. And it's interesting to think that could all be part of the manifestation of the spiritual realm in us, that we yield to the Holy Spirit, which is the good thoughts, everything good and perfect and pure. But when we yield to the fearful and demonic thoughts, then that's all the scary bad stuff. When I start thinking about that, it's taken on a new light. The more I know, my faith grows.
I know you're a thinker, and whenever you get that stuff figured out, please let me know.
I probably won't figure it out.
You got a 3-pound, hunk of flesh in your skull.
Yeah.
Why in the world am I hearing a chant in my head saying, kill myself?
Right.
I like what one man said. He said, whether or not you believe in the devil or possession or oppression or depression, all that kind of thing, if you can say all you want, that's not spiritual, or that's not the devil, but something is beating your brains out,
right. Yeah.
and trying to kill you. And okay.
Yeah.
Call it chemicals.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I know what I call it.
Right.
I believe in the spiritual world, and it's like the old evangelist D.L. Moody. He said, "How do you know if the devil's real?" And he said, "I've done business with him."
Yeah.
And
it is. It's an interesting shift in just almost in terminology and perspective. It's when you, and I hope I never forget this, how I was before Christ, because everything was just a secular vocabulary, really. And now it's the same phenomena that I was trying to explain before Christ. And now that I am a little bit more biblically literate, I can recognize that I think that the explanations for the why the stuff happens makes more sense from a spiritual standpoint than it does from just a deterministic biological, molecular level. And the more I learn, it just makes more sense now. So,
and I so appreciate that, because so many people have strong opinions about spiritual things, and yet they've spent so much more time developing their own secular or earthly perspectives, and they haven't even taken time to seek the Lord to develop that part of their spirit.
Right.
And yet they have such strong opinions about it. So
Yeah.
you have experienced both now, and you can look in the rearview mirror and say, wow, that this actually outweighs this. And I think you're so right.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. And that's the kind of stuff that the more God moves, it just becomes more and more fascinating. I was going to say, too, that your testimony reminds me of Marcus, honestly, from our church that just basically was born again like 3 weeks ago. I love that guy. He's, he was sobbing that first day, and I want to have him on the podcast and talk to him about that experience, because it was clearly like it was moving me to tears when he was telling me about and again, it was like it wasn't this. I mean, he had a hard upbringing, but it wasn't his actual experience encounter with God in his bed watching a TikTok video was like, that's mundane stuff. That's nothing crazy, but it's so powerful. It's just amazing. And to hear him talk about it, and I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up, who knows, but I wouldn't be surprised if in his head he's taken a similar path as you. Like, I know what I want to do now, because he was in that similar lost place, didn't know what he wanted to do, and now everything makes sense to him. So,
you read the Gospels, and you find out that most of the things Jesus did in people's lives were when they were just on their way somewhere or life was happening. It was just normal stuff. Somebody gets sick, or somebody dies, or somebody's at the market, or whatever it is, and Jesus intervenes. It's so much like that in our lives. And you said it earlier, the attention getters, the testimonies that seem to gather the attention are those that have, these huge things that happen.
Right.
But the reality is God works in so many simple forms and intervenes in such cool different ways with people's lives. I love it.
Yeah. Let me ask, so I assume that you have very vivid memory of the bowling alley testimony. Are there any that stand out as, you've been a Christian now for 40, well, you're only 35, right? So, what is that, like 17 years?
Times two.
Like that?
Yeah.
Are there any other like encounters that stand out, like as maybe number 2 or number 3 in your book, is like, man, that was something I'll never forget with God?
For sure. And I didn't share a lot of encounters that happened even before I had that bowling alley experience. But there were times throughout my young life when I remember getting on a school bus when I was probably 12 or 13, and eyes swollen from sleep and hair stuck to my head because I didn't have time to dry it properly, getting out of the shower. And I remember the school bus driver stopping me, looking right at me and saying, "Young man, the hand of God is on you." I literally felt like electricity in my body, went and sat in the seat on the bus and just sat there and buzzed. These types of things where there's little markers where he's reminding you, I see you, boy. I see, I love you. I have a plan for your life. So those types of things. After salvation, certainly powerful encounters here and there. You want me to talk about some of them, or
maybe one? Yeah, because I got another question for you after that. That's
I'll share this one. Sitting in a lounge chair, drinking a cup of coffee with the Bible on my lap. In a time of ministry, I was out of state. I was living alone. I wasn't married yet, and all of a sudden, the ceiling, not given to this, but literally the ceiling vanished in my living room. And I saw hundreds of the most grotesque faces. You ever push your face against a piece of glass, it kind of distorts like that? It was like 100 of those smashing their faces, and they were hurling obscenities and accusations and threats. And I'm looking at it, literally looking right at it, listening to it. And it was as if there was a piece of plexiglass, kind of a curved piece of plexiglass that wasn't allowing them to get to me. I didn't have any fear. I was just observing it. And it was as though they were cursing me and yelling everything I've ever done wrong. And all of a sudden I heard in my heart, I am your shield. And I recognize that from the words that God spoke to Abraham. I am your shield and your exceeding great reward. Many times like that, and I say many times, I've been walking with the Lord for 40 years. So, every couple, 3 years, if you can, like that, it wasn't every day. I don't have these encounters every day, but there were times, just critical times in my life when the Lord would demonstrate himself to me in these kind of ways that gave me comfort or strengthened me or answered a question or something along those lines. Yeah,
little winks. Regarding your ministry, well, similar to what I mentioned that Randy had preached, the glory to glory moments. I'm curious, were there any encounters in your ministry that were guiding posts, I guess, where, throughout the years, you've been, you were a youth pastor first at Lifepoint, and then,
I was.
In your journey through ministry, were there maybe a few of those, where you felt God telling you, go this way, go that, Ivan Tate told this story about God telling him to go and preach, and, I don't have a truck. Well, here's a truck, and that type of thing. Anything like that where it kind of guided your ministry to where you are today?
In my young years, I always knew that I was supposed to be in ministry, but when I was leaving college, Bible college, I had 3 opportunities. One was to go to Nottingham, near Amsterdam, to the School of Creative Evangelism, which I loved evangelism, and that would have been cool. Also had an opportunity to go to Texas to be in a large church as a youth minister, and then an opportunity to come back to our home church and do youth ministry. I had analysis paralysis. My idea about the will of God at that time was that, I have the potential to choose 2 out of the 3 of these are going to be wrong and they're going to ruin my life.
Yeah.
When I finally determined that I would, I called a professor, my favorite professor back at school, and I told him my dilemma, and he said, Rick, you're called to ministry, and if you're not getting clarity, I think that the Lord is probably saying to you, son, which one do you want? And that set me free. And I learned a lot about the will of God regarding, I guess I've taken the stance that I'm not a red light until I see green anymore in my life. I'm a green light until I see red. Yeah. I've just got a lot of freedom now to pursue. And I think God trusts his sons and his daughters as they put their trust in him. That was one thing. Probably the other thing real quick is when I got a call early one morning from a pastor in Kentucky. Now, I'm from Michigan. To me, at that time, Kentucky, I thought you maybe got a bunch of people together in Kentucky to see if you could come up with a full set of teeth. I had no idea about Kentucky except banjos and, you know whiskey. What I mean? Yeah, it was strange. But I went to Kentucky. This guy had a church, and he said that we've got a youth group, and we need somebody to look over our school. And they had a kindergarten through 12th grade school, and they needed a chaplain, blah, blah, blah. So I went and spent a week there and preached and taught and different things. And at the end of the week, I called my buddy. And he said, well, what are you going to do? Because I was already working at our home church. Yeah. And he said, and I said to him, I said, I'd rather, I'd rather slip booties on a Bengal tiger than come to Kentucky. I have no interest in it. I had to fly out the next morning, and they had a banquet that night. And the associate pastor said, "You want to just come and get a meal and, before you fly out?" I said, "I ain't got nothing to do. I might as well." Sitting there at that banquet, they're honoring this pastor who had been there for 10 years at the time. And of course, this was a man who was trying to get me to come and work there. And I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden, as clear as I'm talking to you right now, I hear, "You will work with that man." And I don't know. I immediately acquiesced. I was like, "Yes, sir, I will," and that was settled.
Yeah.
And I next morning they said, "Well, what do you think?" I said, "Well, I'm yours if you want me." I remember them saying, "Would you like to know about your wage?" And I said, "I don't care. I don't. I really didn't care, because it's like the Lord already told me to come, so I'm going to come, whatever." But it was a year later that I met my wife. I met Dana, and so He knows. The Lord, the Lord knows how to lead His sons.
Yeah, and that obedience to hear it and listen. Because like you said, that one time laying on the grass, you heard it, but you didn't obey.
Man, you pay a price. I tell you what.
It's interesting.
The Lord knows how to spank His boys if they need it, and He let me have it. And a good, His discipline is the work of a loving Father.
Right.
And man, it was no fun.
Yeah. That's profound too, because that actually leads me into the next question, because you met Dana there. How has having a family and being a father and now a grandfather, how has that affected? Has that changed or enhanced your relationship with God?
I'm certain it has. Have I taken the time to qualify all that? I guess, that's reserved for old men who are, all they have to do is think. I don't know. Right now I'm
you're still busy.
Yeah. But I don't think it's possible that couldn't have affected my perception of God. One of the things I think on the other hand is what I consider the greatest privilege of my life is being a dad, and affecting my daughter's perspective of God. That has been an honor for me. I don't even know how to really put it into words, except I feel it.
Yeah.
I feel such a sense of responsibility for that, and my grandchildren. How are they going to view God? And I recognize that much of that is going to come from how they view me. It's just the way God designed it. Your children, Tony, will, you're passing the baton of your faith to your children is going to have a lot, their reception of that baton is going to have a lot to do with how accurately you reflect the Father. If you reflect Him well, that transition will be almost effortless. If there's such a disconnect, then there's going to be a lot of confusion and possibly even a shipwrecked faith. Right. I remember my youngest, she was on the top bunk. I've told this story plenty at the church, but I remember asking her, I said, "Honey, what do you think God is like?" And she was probably 5. And she just as innocently and without a hesitation, she said, "I think He's like you, Daddy." And whoa, that I was like, wow, that's powerful. That came home to me how critical that was. And so it's important how we live, and it's important that our walk with God is sincere and authentic, so that our children can receive that and understand what the Father is like. So have they changed me, was your question? I think without a doubt, but I guess the greater thing for me is, have I changed them?
Right.
And I hope so.
Yeah.
I hope so.
Well, judging by your family, I'm thinking you have.
I hope so.
Your granddaughter and your daughters. It's your family is like I said at the beginning, the leadership that you guys provide us sheep is invaluable, I would call it.
Yeah, I love my girls. That's for sure. Our greatest. I sing it I don't sing this song at Christmas. We're approaching Christmas. I sing this song in June and Father's Day. It's the most wonderful time of the year. Really, because I love it.
Yeah.
I love being a dad.
I'm with you. And the more as Lucy gets older and she's doing all of her fun stuff, man, it's the more, the other day, all three of them were piling on me on the couch. And I mean, it happens. It's like every other day that happens, but it just took a moment during that time and was just soaking it in, it's just so cool. And they're just so happy and innocent and we'll have one more. And
the opportunity to form them.
Yeah. And then the vision of the future, what kind of, like you said, that how hard that hits you and realize how serious it is that your kids look at you to help them define what God is like. And they're going to do that regardless of whether you live like God or not, which means that you're responsible for it. You could end up giving them an incorrect belief about God if you're not living
That's exactly right.
closely with the Lord. Yeah, that's
Ephesians 5:1 says, "Be imitators of God." I mean, wow.
Yeah.
We're to imitate Him so that our children can see that. It's one of my pet peeves with families. I see families today probably more than when I was a kid. They will spend amazing, inordinate amounts of money to put their kids in soccer or baseball or traveling volleyball, everything like that. And they'll spend so much time with their physical development and also their academically. Yeah. They'll put so much pressure on kids to perform academically and spend so little time developing their spirit.
Yeah.
And that seems so imbalanced.
Yeah.
And I don't have a regret, not a single regret, investing in that part of my kids' lives. And my kids are kind of like me anyway. They're not terribly athletic. I've said it a lot. My coach said, he said, "Rick, you're not real smart, but you're slow." And so, I guess I didn't have great temptation to put my kids in all of these athletic things anyway. Yeah. And God bless parents who do that. Yeah. Just let there be balance. Right. That's what I say.
Yeah, because it seems like when that always comes to me, the put the first thing, like that saying, "Put the first things first," to me sums up the relationship that we're meant to have with God. When you put God first, everything else falls into line exactly where it's meant to be. I think I spoke about that at 181, that if you seek Him first, you're going to have more joy and succeed more in your athletics and your academics and everything else. He wants us to do all that stuff. So, and that's what I found to be true in my own life. When I put that stuff first, everything else falls into place the way it's meant to be when I obey what He wants me to do.
Yeah, if your spirit lives on, which I believe, the body, we're going to put this thing to rest one day, and along with our natural mind. But if our spirit continues, why would we want our mind and our flesh, our bodies, to be the main influencers of our spirit rather than our spirit being the main influencer for our mind and our body? Right. Lots of people have that twisted around. You want the spirit governing your mind and your body. And it's a good way to live.
It's the way He meant it to be.
Yeah, it's a good way to live.
Well, I think that's all I've got question-wise. I really appreciate your openness and agreeing to do this. We're experimenting. It's podcast episode number 1. So is there anything that you want to add that people that might be watching this that are, who knows, I don't know, people that might be watching this would be hungry for that testimony idea of like, what can God do in your life? Is there anything that you'd want to say to them before we end it?
I think about the words of Jesus when he's talking to a man named Nicodemus. Let's call him Nick. He's talking to Nick, and he says something about the Spirit. Jesus says, "The Spirit blows where it wishes, and where it comes from and where it goes, nobody really knows. right? And it specifically says he's talking about the Holy Spirit. You don't have to be in some religious place. That's what I would say to folks in order to encounter God. I was at a bowling alley.
All right.
The Spirit of God at a precise time in my life, a critical time in my life, blew into that bowling alley and changed my life. And I would say to anybody watching, right where you are, right where you find yourself listening to this podcast, the Spirit of God is there. He's blowing through your heart, your mind, and he's knocking, and he's pleading, and he's saying, would you consider the Savior? Would you consider Jesus? Because the Holy Spirit always points to Jesus. And he's not there looking to, get you to sign on a religious bottom line. He's not trying to even make you religious. He just, the Father of creation wants to know you and walk with you and teach you. And it's pretty cool to have God of creation as your teacher and as your friend. So absolutely. I would just say, open up your heart. Yeah. Open up your heart and say, yes, God, I invite you in to have your way with me, to show me. It's lonely out there, man. Yeah. It's cold out there. Yeah. It's cold outside, and we need help. Yeah. And I'm so thankful to God that he helped me. I have no idea where I'd be. Yeah. And it's nice to be with you.
Yeah, I hear you.
This is cool.
Well, thanks again. I appreciate, like I said, I really appreciate you coming out here and doing it and being the first guest on this trial run here. And thanks to everyone that's watching and listening. I appreciate your time and attention. And yeah, I just pray that God would use this testimony to further your relationship with God or help you meet him. So thanks, everybody.